Hey gang. So I had so much fun making the last video that I wanted to do another one on part of our strategic plan that we haven't really gotten into yet, but that I think is important, and I think it's going to take, if we try to do it in our next board meeting, I think it's going to take a while, if we're just looking at it for the first time. And so what we're looking at here is the MAPJ theory of change. It's on one of the first few pages of the strategic plan. Um, this is a tool that a lot of nonprofits use. Lots of people who are just doing projects use these things. I've used it in the classroom a number of times. And my experience has been that it takes a minute to learn what this thing is and how to read it and how to use it. So I just wanted to do like a really brief um, sort of video on this theory of change and describe what we're looking at, and and then we can talk about if this we can talk about edits that we might want to make to it once we actually meet. So the theory of change, sometimes they're called logic models, is basically like a, a visual representation of how our organization is going to make the change that we say that we're going to make. So there's a lot in here, and it takes a while to really distill it down into like the nuts and bolts of and getting the wording right. Really, um, at the end of the day, it's just a tool to help us all have sort of like the same theory and strategy in our minds about like how we're going about pursuing our mission. And so it's really important, and it's a very efficient way to sort of describe basically everything that we're doing. Okay, so what are we looking at here? So the theory of change is split up into basically like four parts here. Inputs. Inputs are things that our organization, and our people are putting into the organization and the work. Activities are what we do with with those inputs. Outcomes are what we expect to happen as a result of those activities, in the short term, intermediate, and the long term. And then, well, what impact do we expect to have in the community? And this is a really important one, and one that we haven't talked about very like really explicitly yet. But let's start doing that. So, and I'm going to start with impact, and then work backwards, which I think is a very logical way of doing this. Start with the end in mind. And so again, our mission is to provide and leadership training and support for direct action community organizing in Manhattan. Um, that isn't in itself impact. That's what we do to have impact. Um, but if we did that really well, what kinds of impact what kinds of change, what kinds of concrete changes would we see in the community? And one possibility here that makes a lot of sense to me is that, well, we would see a change in policy, right? Like we would see changes in the way that our community is designed and governed. So policy wins, and policy wins that lead to real concrete improvements in people's lives. So so wins here is policy wins is kind of like a unit you know of impact. Um, and you can tell that leaves a lot of flexibility in terms of what those policies are, because we don't know what all of those things are yet. Um, so what else would we see? Well, we would also see powerful organizations. This is debatable. Powerful organizations could go somewhere, before, somewhere in the outcomes. We might not consider it impact, but um, in any case, there is sort of the mantra, I suppose, that organizers build organizations. And if we buy that, if we believe that, which is also what we're doing with our own organization, with Renters Together, it would be what we would do with the Living Wage Coalition. We're building an organization there to run an issue campaign. The Coalition for Equal Justice is a type of organization, and we're supporting all kinds of other organizations, whether they're neighborhood associations or coalitions for like the People's Agenda and those kinds of things. And so we build organizations. And so if we were doing our work well, we might say that a part of our impact would be we would see more powerful organizations, and power being defined by people and by money. People, registered voters, the number of people involved in different organizations, and what have you. And again, I put powerful coalitions here that could be, easily wrapped up in powerful organizations. And so that's one possibility for what our work, leads to, right? Like what does community organizing training and our issue campaigns that we're leading lead to? They lead to policy wins. That it's a pretty standard, I think, metric in community organizing. What did you win? Did you win anything? And generic enough that it allows us to be adaptable to different issues and constituencies and problems that we might face in the community. Okay, so that's impact. Now, right before impact are outcomes, and again, outcomes are the things that result from the activities that we do. So let me, for the sake of what I think is more accessible and simple, start with activities. Okay, so what is it that we do to get to impact? Well, we do a few things. Okay, we've been doing strategic planning, and this is MAPJ. This is just MAPJ. So we're not talking about like Renters Together here. That's not MAPJ. That's sort of a project within MAPJ. So what do we do? Well, our board does all kinds of things right now. We do strategic planning. We do direct action organizing, right? Like we're providing leadership in organizing, and so that right now that looks like the People's Forum. We do support Renters Together. We hired an organizer. We do direct action organizing. We also train the community in direct action organizing. That's going on right now. We also support the community in direct action organizing. And that looks like a number of different things. We also do, very basic, organizational activities. We do fundraising. We do leadership development. We do membership recruitment, and we do evaluation, right? Like we evaluate ourselves and to see to what extent we're doing what we said we were going to do, and determine whether or not we're having impact. And so those are the things that we do, and we hope that when we do those things, that we're reaching impacted members of the community. That might overlap with MAPJ members, but we definitely want to reach MAPJ members. We involve them in all of this work at different levels. We want to reach alliance organizations. The People's Forum is a really good example of that. Current community leaders, again, People's Forum is a good example of that. Coalition for Equal Justice, another one. Emerging community leaders. There's again, the People's Forum, I think, is a really good example of that. And also, Alex, who's already with us, who we might say is an emerging community leader. Although I think he's pretty well in the seat there, and decision makers. So if we do those activities and we do them well, what would what outcomes would we expect from that? And we're gonna go through that. You know, we're gonna kind of break that down by short, intermediate, and long term, because again, there's a lot going on in this theory of change, right? And there is some sequence to how things probably will happen. And so assuming that a lot of what our mission is training and support. Um, you know, in the short term, we would expect a major outcome to be learning, that people in the community, including our board, including our members, understand the principles of direct action organizing. And that people have confidence in using those concepts and tools, right? So we're putting what we learn from the Midwest Academy and from our experience and other resources. Um, we're sharing that within our organization, and we're sharing that with the community. And the first thing that we would expect to happen is that people learn. There's learning that happens. People understand what these things are, and that they're confident in using those things. If we do that, then logically, again, logic model here, if we do that, if that happens, then we would expect people to start taking action, right? So just because you go to a training and you learn something, that doesn't get us impact. You actually have to put that into action. And so those concepts and tools that we talk about and show people and bring people along in collaborating with us on things that we lead, those are put into practice. They're implemented. And then importantly, those concepts and tools for community organizing are handed down within organizations, right? That is by definition like what a culture of community organizing is, right? It's information that gets passed from one generation to another, and in this case, it's kind of like it could be from one board or one um, membership base to another, right? Like we want people in organizations really owning and institutionalizing this culture, this skill set, this set of concepts and tools. So importantly, that is a very central part of our theory of change. And depending on how we sort of orient ourselves to the community and other organizations with our trainings, we might expect more organizations to be requesting training or coming to trainings and things like this. So we're growing. Okay, so if people take action and they start using those tools, then in the long term, we would expect changes in conditions, right? And again, we have to be somewhat generic here because we don't know exactly what those changes would be. But if a fair unit of analysis would be, we want to increase the number of issue campaigns, right, in the community. So more organizations are getting organized, and they are organizing around direct action issue campaigns. They are doing direct action organizing. And in theory, those lead to concrete changes in the community and in people's lives. So, and that's measurable, right? Like we could have a way of monitoring how many issue campaigns are actually being implemented out there. We might also say that another change in conditions that is valued is the number of elected officials supported by partner organizations and our constituents, right? So we're getting more people into office. We're getting more people in the office. Other organizations are getting more people in the office. Our coalitions are getting more people in the office, and that's that could be local, that could be state, and that could be national as well. And so that's So if we do, this is really, again, just a bunch of if-then statements. If we do this, if we do these things, then we reach these people, then we can expect this. We can expect learning to happen, and if that happens, we can expect more people to be taking action, and if more people are taking action, then we we can expect more changes in actual conditions, and if we see that, then we can expect to see, real policy wins and more powerful organizations. Okay, so that's the theory of change, and then the only one that we haven't talked about is this one all the way to the left. These are our inputs, our resources, what we invest. So we have people, we have a board, we have members, we have volunteers, we have right now we have a community organizer, we have some money, we have some time, we have materials, we have a listserv, we have Facebook, we have a website, and this is abbreviated, but we have these things. We have space. We have relationships with different people and different organizations, Midwest Academy being just but one of those. And we have our own reputation and our branding and recognition in the community. And so if we invest those things, we do these things, we expect these kinds of outcomes, and then this kind of impact in a nutshell. And so when we meet to talk about this, it would be really helpful to really make sure we're on the same page with this theory of change, right? Like, and probably the first thing is, do we agree on the kind of impact that we're trying to achieve here, and does this, do these activities, are these really what we do, and do these activities really lead to these outcomes, and do these outcomes lead to this impact, or will they? And so we can get, to be fair, we can get caught up in a lot of minutia here, and I think that's okay. I don't think we want to get too bogged down in this. My sense is that we all have a pretty good idea of what we're trying to do. This just makes it very visible in basically one sheet of paper, and so that's what you're looking at, and hopefully we can dig into this a little bit in our next board meeting when we approve the strategic plan.